Welcome to my look at the Iron Giant, celebrating 25 years since its initial release. The film, directed by Brad Bird, based on the book by Ted Hughes, is easily one of my favorite stories of a robot and their ex that I've ever seen. Let's open it up and talk about why. This review is based on the Signature Edition, which is the cut I most often revisit. The story is set in the Cold War of the year 1957, taking place in the small port town of Rockwell, Maine. Though the story of a shipwrecked sailor does draw skepticism, it does get the attention of authorities, which we'll come back to in a bit. The movie also has a great score from Michael Kamen in one of the last films he contributed music to. The main lead is Hogarth Hughes, voiced by Eli Marienthal, whose mother Annie, voiced by Jennifer Aniston, is raising him alone. Even as a kid, I was able to put it together that his dad went to war and didn't come back. Going to this movie with a single mom gives you that kind of intuition. My favorite of the human characters would have to be the conceptual artist Steve McCoppin, voiced by Harry Connick Jr. It's essentially coolness personified for that time period, like an animated Fonz. One night, when Mrs. Hughes was working late at the diner, as one does, a night in which a campy B-movie is cut short by a wrecked antenna, Hogarth goes in the forest with a flashlight strapped to his air rifle looking for the source of problem, and sure enough, it finds him. Crossing past the titular Iron Giant, the robot is impacted by a dent on his head and getting fried by the power grid. This attracts the attention of authorities, particularly Camp Mansley, voiced by Christopher McDonald. Basically, whenever you needed a love-to-hate antagonist for your movie in those days and William Atherton wasn't available, he was your guy. Plus, lots of his scenes have been quite mimetic. My milkshakes, the boys, they're coming! While Annie has a strict no pets policy, hiding a giant robot is obviously much trickier. This does lead to many of the movie's most memorable scenes, and subconsciously planting the seed of my appreciation for Robot and their X stories. Going through his comic collection also adds the Yo You Choose to Be theming, which we'll come back to later. Do you want to be a massive red menace, or a protector like Superman? I will say it's one of the most effective combinations of CG and digital animation even to this day. Not only was it touching on Marvel at the time of release, but the Giant's design also paid homage to the science fiction films that were its inspiration. There's even a film shown at school that recalls actual nuclear attack safety ones done at the time, albeit with a mole instead of a turtle, like some of the actual ones. Dean is also a scrapper, a slightly more legitimate means of funding his outsider art projects. Once Kent arrives, able to trace Hogarth with what's left of his air rifle. Elsewhere, Hogarth and the Giant bond. The scene where I had to hurriedly reconnect the train tracks before the express comes still gives me chills to this day. Come back to this after he comes out of the barn, but iron and circuits can be put back together. Flesh and blood, not so easily. Mansley comes for dinner, but General Rogard, played by John Mahoney, is skeptical. He wants photographic evidence, and it's before he and his men get boots on the ground. Fair enough, and it's shown that they all have rooms for rent. Given the time and circumstances of the setting, it makes sense. You used to hear that song all the time on the oldie stations. Dean, while slightly annoyed at the Giant eating his art, does see him for an outsider like himself rather than a threat. Even to this day, the espresso scene gets me every time. Not just for Hogarth's comedic, caffeinated motor mouth, but for the arc words he has. You are who you choose to be. Expect nothing less from a man in a yin-yang bathrobe. Of course, is on the trail, which Hogarth throws off by spiking his milkshake with chocolate laxatives. Classic. The whole scene in the pharmacy's counter is easily one of some of Bird's best work. The whole movie is in the same portfolio I keep the Incredibles films and the Simpsons episodes he worked on. The swimming hole scene is also great, especially like the disaster scene as Catastrophe Looms headline in joke as the Giant dives in. Elsewhere, Kent has his photo evidence, and we also get one of the key scenes in the movie, the deer being shot dead by hunters. Not only does it work for showing how fragile organic life is compared to the giants, I actually consider it to be more effective than the similar scene in Bambi, all because it was simple but effective change in perspective. The signature edition also adds a scene not present in the theatrical cut that briefly but effectively foreshadows who the giant really is, adding shades of grey to both his and Story's conflict as Dean falls asleep watching Tonight Show. Kent snaps, demanding to know where the giant is. Comes clear that Hogarth won't yield even with his photos. He has him put under surveillance in his home. However, being the child of a late fighter pilot, his helmet and bomber jacket belonged to his dad. He picked up a thing or two about strategy. That is also great malicious compliance. Make it look like he snuck out, but instead getting a good night's sleep and walking out the front door. The military arrives, and Dean is able to stall for just long enough for the giant to pass himself off as his latest work of art. Dean also strikes up a rapport with Annie, and Kent gets an earful from the general. You'll be Chief Inspector scrubbing toilets while I'm finished with you. As the giant plays Superman with Hogarth, something awakens deep inside his programming. Dean has a hasty moment of realization as he picks up Hogarth's ray gun. As the snow falls, the giant also saves 2 children from falling. However, Kent's paranoia runs away with him as the army tries to intervene under his faulty evidence. Every attack he takes is returned multiple times over. With nearly all options exhausted, only one remains, the A-bomb. The military is reluctant. Kent is clearly too far gone by this point. Screw our country, I want to live. Going over their heads to get the order, they understandably clocks for this. As the bomb falls, the giant takes the blast, recalling the words he heard one last time. Are who you choose to be, Superman. Say what you will about him in human terms, Vin Diesel still has fantastic voice work in this film to this day. We close on the giant being canonized with a memorial for his sacrifice, and the last bolt finding its way back home to his body in Iceland. Even when I saw this in the theater for the first time with my mom, my late brother, and my late granddad, I knew it would be something special. Though the movie made around just half its budget back domestically, it did do decent numbers internationally, and was highly acclaimed by those who did see it. It really took off on home media, especially when Cartoon Network showed it every Thanksgiving for a time. It's one of a couple films, the other will be addressed later in the year, that can be attributed to Ted Turner seeing on a plane and spearheading the revamped post-theatrical promotion, more or less saying words to the effect of, "Why did nobody tell me the movie my company had a hand in was so good?" As for the characters' appearances in multiverses, Ready Player One, and the second Space Jam, well, I can argue that proves a point I've made before, including today. Just because a film doesn't always hit when it first comes out, it doesn't mean it can't leave a positive long-term impact. But how much I and others love this film, I can honestly say it has left that impact. My final rating is 4 out of 4. I want to thank you all for letting me share this with you all. I'll see you all again soon. Take care.